Welcome, everyone, to the Aquarian series given by the ULT every week in San Diego. And we have a wonderful surprise for you today. We are doing the Aquarian series from the home of Leigh J. McCloskey. His home, his studio, just incredible. He is going to uh, do a special afternoon entitled Leigh J. McCloskey on Art, Archetypes, and HPB. Before I turn it over to Leigh J. McCloskey, I would like to do for you a reading. Okay, this is from The Voice of the Silence. O disciple, before thou wert made fit to meet thy teacher face to face, thy master light to light, what were thou told? Before thou canst approach the foremost gate, thou hast to learn to part thy body from thy mind, to dissipate the shadow, and to live in the eternal. For this thou hast to live and breathe in all, as all that thou perceivest breathes in thee, to feel thyself abiding in all things in self. Thou shalt not let thy senses make a playground of thy mind. Thou shalt not separate thy being from being and the rest, but merge the ocean in the drop within the ocean. So shalt thou be in full accord with all that lives. Bear love to men as though they were thy brother pupils, disciples of one teacher, the sons of one sweet mother. Of teachers there are many. The master soul is one, Alaya, the universal soul. Live in that master as its ray in thee. Live in thy fellows as they live in it.
Thank you, Monica. I am, well, actually, although I respond to Leigh, I am Leigh McCloskey. But I'm really delighted to join you tonight and to talk about these things because you might not know it, and I imagine you don't, but I had a ULT discussion group in my home here for 25 years. And every Tuesday night we gathered. And one of the elements that I want to share, and unfortunately, because the technology is what it is, which I don't take it personally, but I have always endured the sense that technology has a very wicked sense of humor. Um, so, not to get too over one's skis, so to speak, we return to humility and we begin to say, all right, well, let's look. Because we moved here to this home in Malibu in 1981, and not with any intention to do anything more than just to have a place to raise our family. But I responded to a Theosophy ad at Carolyn Van Horn's house and started going because I was reading a lot and I kept running into the name Blavatsky. And also, I think probably a lot of people feel this way. When you read a lot, you start to realize a type of ceiling where you need to know more. You need to get behind not just the outer. You really want to get to the inner. And this is what I found so remarkable about my timing with Blavatsky and with Carolyn was because I went over to her house, but the first, and I think this is very telling, I went over and we all met and I left. I found it interesting, but I thought, oh, I don't, I'm a maverick. I don't really need to talk about these things. I'll figure them out on my own. And luckily, I was meditating, and my inner guidance said because I said, oh, I don't really, I don't know, I don't need this discussion really. And it told me, there's a great wisdom. It said, no, I want you to go back to the discussion group, but I want you to see everyone in the discussion group as your own mind, your own brain, so that you're not just looking about how you express something, which is pretty much as you do when you're young. Well, it's my point of view. And this was learning to listen differently, and also learning how certain people express their ideas very well, others haltingly, others, but there are those that think very deeply but don't say much. And so you start to listen differently and hold the energy differently. What was really rather remarkable was that Carolyn and Malibu, we became a city, and Carolyn became our first mayor. And so I said, well, let's bring the group over to my home. And we started reading, and for 25 years we've gathered. And it was funny because I had this dream where because in Malibu we were known as the creative group, and I thought, okay, well, I had a dream early on in Theosophy that there, and I was in a 19th century with wooded, really beautiful wooden libraries from the 19th century with all these great tomes, great books, large volumes, and I looked around, and there were all of these people at high desks with really big books, with accountants' visors, with the green visor and the lamp, covered with cobwebs. And so I was merrily going around, slamming the books, and all of this dust was going up, and I didn't realize it then, but I think that was what was starting to get at that the knowledge was there. It needed to be dusted off. It needed to be awakened. And a lot of what I want to just sort of share today, I wanted to show you more of the art here, but I think I would just suggest that if you can, just on your computer, Google Leigh McCloskey or Leigh J. McCloskey art, or the hieroglyph of the human soul, or tarot, and you'll begin to see a lot of my work. Why this is important, and what I wanted to really talk about today, because it's now been 45 years since we began the Theosophical discussion groups here. And one of the great keys I find is that in the study of something, in the honoring of something, oftentimes there's no realization of, well, what's the point? What's the outcome? Why does this matter so much to me? But I find that for so many it doesn't matter. And over the years, I have really realized that one of the great gifts that Theosophy, that Blavatsky, and this willingness to show up over and over again taught me was about creating place, the worthiness of the conversation, not the outcome of the conversation. And I deeply admired that, because it was always, let's not try and dominate the subject. Let's, more like actors in a performance, begin to rehearse, begin to ruminate, see where this leads us. And that has a lot to do with approach. And the maturity that happened here is that in 1985 I began working on the tarot revision, my work on the tarot, and not having an agenda. I did not have a type of, oh, it's going to be this and it has to be that. I wasn't even sure I knew I could do it. It was more like an actor's humility. I'm going to take the role on, hopefully we'll hope. And what I found amazing was, because I think that this was really a beginning of a shift, because Theosophy was beginning, and I realized that when I wrote the book on the tarot, that one of the great things that was missing from the tarot, from the symbolical tradition, was a type of cosmogonic spine, a type of really like why. What are the root causes, the origin, not just the effect. What are the causes? And because of Theosophy and the questions it was asking, when I began work on the tarot, what was I was sketching. I was asked as a favor, so it wasn't something that I had intended to do, and I had the well, I realized they say Hermes tricks you onto your path. I had the hubris when my friend Ed Steinbrecher said, Leigh, why don't you try drawing a tarot? And I said, sure, Ed, how hard could that be? Well, 17 years later, and realizing it really, I just feel the universe said, oh, we've got him now. So after 17 years, and the image is like this is the it's called the Magus. Usually there's a magician in a deck. But this deck, now think about Theosophy as a seed. Remember the seed Manu, this relationship to it's not the planting of time, but the planting of seed ideas within the canvas of time that then reveal their deeper purpose. And what's amazing here is as we look, we see the seed, and we see the magus, not the magician. The magician is this trickster, the one that says it's optical illusion. But this is actually saying, no, all wisdom, all tradition, perennial wisdom is planted. It's a seed. And that, as Monica read in the beginning, it's a seed that contains the voice. Now the voice will become uniquely our story. And that's what's interesting here, is if we think about the element of Theosophy, being that which is not paid much attention to in our culture, because it takes time. It takes dedication. It takes the ability to say, let's slow down and honor these things. If we're in a rush, who has time for it? And so I feel, though, the distillation going on is to be aware that all of these symptoms are here. In other words, that it's not about more or change or difference. It's much more about slowing down and saying, wait a minute, let's take stock now. Let's look around at what were the things that triggered. And what's amazing for me, this is why I'm so glad that, and I'm really honored, because I'm sitting with, as many of you know, many of your friends from the ULT in San Diego. And I've always wanted to get back together and to say to Theosophists how essential this willingness to get together and to come together and say, it is up to us to say this matters. And I realize now that, as in any relationship, the truth that this matters is the thing that seeds it. You matter. If you matter, then suddenly you show up. Mm. And so much of the time we're in, and this is where I keep feeling that when a person comes to the story here, beginning with the Magus, which is planted in the about 1985, we'll start to see that a type of magic historically was being planted. That's also a time that there was a change. For me, I started in 1981 during the Reagan years hosting these events, because I started to recognize that politics had reached the end of legitimate dialogue. It was going to be much more Hollywood, what side are you on? Are you the red team? Which it really has become. And what I love is that the call then wasn't to lift a fist and go out and protest, but to say, maybe it's the story that's the problem. You know, maybe it's what we're putting into our sense of why we matter that's the problem. And if we just start with the argument or the resentment, it doesn't do anything more than make us angrier and more resentful. And I really began to see how Theosophy, this ability to show up to ideas that are greater than time, greater than one can grasp, in the best sense of the word, like music. You can't grasp music, you can't grasp truth. It is. And this is why the subtlety going on, and why I'm delighted to talk today about archetype and art and Blavatsky, is I love her. I feel this profound sense of communion with her, because I spent every evening, Tuesday evening, for 25 years. And this begins to say that many of the deep relationships we have are not in body. They're not in time. They're in a condition that is waiting for us to say, let this matter here. Let us be the gardener. Let us say amongst ourselves, if we honor, then what will grow will be a thing of honor. And this is why the art that manifested here, the beginning of the tarot, and I wanted to, because I'm speaking with Theosophists and the theosophical minded, that I wanted to say that when I worked on the tarot, I worked and I sketched, and it was very obvious. I was illustrating. I was saying, oh, it means this, and symbolically it's that. And I knew it was like knowing as a performer this is going to be terrible. It's like, I don't believe me. I don't believe the performance. I suck. And I was sketching and sketching and sketching. And I want to read the beginning, because it was actually the stanzas of the book of Xian, which was my breakthrough. And I write about it in the introduction to my book, Tarot Revisioned. I said it was like hearing a symphony for the first time, where something breaks through that's not in your head. It's like, And this is why much of what I'm getting at with the art, with archetype, is structure, context, and the relationship here of the question of home, domestic space. Because remember, this is where we've had all of these discussions. I mean, and you start doing the addition and you realize that is thousands upon thousands of hours of people showing up. And that, in a magical sense, is repeating over and over and over again, not loudly, but quietly, structurally, by returning, returning, returning. Mm-hmm. And part of the structural element here has led back to the revelation that everything that I've done is the development of instruments, or that patterns, because like a labyrinth, if you think about it, when you walk a labyrinth, it doesn't tell you how to do it or what to do. You begin to reset because you are physically in rapport with the hieroglyphic relationship to your body. So it's not trying to figure it out. It's trying to allow a different relationship. And part of this relationship, and that's why I felt with the stanzas of the book of Xian, what triggers the first archetype, and just listen to this, the music and the mystery of cosmic evolution, because this for me was an epiphanic moment. And I'm not going to read much of it. I just very much feel this moment of where she expresses from these leaves. She does not take personal credit for it, of course. The eternal parent, wrapped in her ever invisible robes, had slumbered once again for 7 eternities. Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration. Universal mind was not, for there were no ahi to contain it. The 7 ways to bliss were not. The great causes of misery were not, for there was no one to produce and get ensnared by them. Darkness alone filled the boundless all, for father, mother, and son were once more one, and the son had not awakened yet for the new wheel and his pilgrimage thereon. The 7 sublime lords and the 7 truths had ceased to be, and the universe, the sun of necessity, was immersed in parinishpana, to be outbreathed by that which is, and yet is not was. The causes of existence had been done away with. The invisible that was and the invisible that is rested in eternal non-being, the one being. Alone, the one form of existence, stretched, boundless, infinite, causeless, in dreamless sleep, and life pulsated, unconscious, in universal space, throughout that all-presence which is sensed by the opened eye of the Dhamma. But where was the Dhamma when the alaya of the universe was in Paramartha and the great wheel was Anupadaka? And therefore the mystery continues. But that ability to take the poetic and place the imagination on a trajectory is when music steps into the story and says, dance, get out of the way, don't resist. And part of this story of walking the mind here that is so important, and we've been sharing some of this, is that there's a great relationship in the narrative, because a lot of it is when you're studying myth, you think, well, what's the point in a deep sense? Where's the application to daily life? Okay, yeah, you've got parinishpana. What is the, manvanta? What does that mean? And I realized that it's when we try and create a context where that's supposed to be meaningful in the everyday, as opposed to saying, no, this is actually a key now of note what you have had to value because you value it. Not because when you share it, it's, oh, that's great, but because it matters to you. And that is a key to intimate relationships. It's also a key to esotericism. Think of analogy and correspondence. Analogy being that the more you love, the more responsible you are to that love. It is not a thing of taking, it's a thing of becoming worthy. And that's why much of the art that's flowed through me, and I feel it's beautiful to express, because whether it was the tarot or what began on 9/11 when the towers in New York come down, which is this room called the Hieroglyph of the Human Soul. And it announced itself as the Hieroglyph of the Human Soul when it began. And part of its relevance, I feel, is trying to say to the human being that it's time for us to create context. It's time for us to integrate our myths. We're not fighting dragons, we're fighting low self-esteem. There's nowhere to get. We've gotten. So the question is, how do we reconnect with the roots? And I feel that Theosophy, going back, it really, you start to go, wait a minute, this rebuilding is very old. We're this part of the story, but Blavatsky, Goethe, Blake, you start to realize there have been strains of consciousness within the Piscean model of mind, meaning authority, being obedient to authority. The Aquarian seed, this Aquarian series, is that each of us are seeds. And I use a theatrical analogy, saying that when you begin to look at the tarot as characters in a play, like a Shakespearean play, you begin to realize the necessity of each key, each character. And you begin to recognize that what the tarot teaches, what archetype teaches, is that we live within a symbolical universe. And that the language of a symbolical universe is not in the I and thou of words, but in the relationship of the transmutation of one thing into another. So let's say we take anguish and we turn it into song, rather than it simply remaining a state of anguish. And this also helps us with the human condition, because you start to say, well, why did they spend 25 years in this room? And why did the hieroglyph of the human soul occur on 9/11/2001? Why for the last quarter of a century has he been working on this, cultivating it, if it is not a message that's not about him or the artist, but about a condition of place? Because the last key, the McCloskey, is the forgotten element of intimacy. Think of lover and beloved. We don't start in, what do you need, my love? How may I honor you? But what may I get? Where do I get? And when I'm done getting, I'll come back and then we'll get together. Think of that as oneself. If I make something of myself, I can get back to me. I'll finally be somebody. And what I really think is important about the theosophical realization was that it wasn't linear. It wasn't getting somewhere. And I realized that with the tarot is that when I was working on it, everything was in a way more terrifying than the last, because especially when something's really good, you end up intimidating yourself. You think, oh, great, new high water mark, because you've raised the bar. But what was amazing for me was that it was a journey that I was learning that that the question is the medium. And that the shift, it's a bit like styles in acting or in music. You start to realize, no, wait a minute, what we're doing is learning how to listen differently. Like certain things you want to, and that's why I use the structure of my house. There are 3 levels here. There's the below, the above, and the in between. As above, so below, but in between my heart. Meaning that when we emerge here, not in the ancient Egyptian hierophantic sense of the cosmology and connection to the stars, but the other question of what happens because we could no longer find our way to the stars? What happens when the obelisk, when the antenna is knocked over and we're forced into darkness, meaning we can't remember? And that the only way to restore is to reclaim slowly. That's why much of this is that question of the Akasha, meaning the universal knowledge. But here, it's actually suggesting that it is the humanization of Akasha that is the essential key to our self-redemption. Because light passes through everything, but light slowed down through matter becomes wisdom, meaning that it learns from its condition. And this is why I feel that here it's trying to hold us, as in Gnosticism, they call it the nous, but here we call it the library. But what Truth is doing as he's walking around is looking at really what I call the first technology of an idea. And if we think about breath and drawing something forth, everything here, as we can see as he's turning, we'll start to realize the pillars. We see this story of ascension between the pillars, that where I'm sitting is you can see with the heron, this story of the phoenix, that we're not born into time, we're born into creation, that we're whole and holy. So think about space here, being that when one sits here, you are reminded, you're restored, And that as we're looking down, as he's wandering, we'll start to see how everything spatially interacts. As one stands here, you're actually spatially being engaged by all of these different elements. But if we think of a library doesn't jump out at you, right? Its resource is that it holds its energy and it waits for us to be curious, to be attracted to that book or that. And this is part of the psychic maturity this room is starting to say, where he's looking with Sophia there and going up to the grail, the chalice. So much of this has to do with, we can see the books in the library, the chalice of wisdom, the knowledge of, the chair here is Eve's chair, the story of birth and origin. This chair will actually, when we sit here, we turn and we will see ourselves in the mirror. And why this becomes so important is that everything is interactive. But think about where the environment itself is trying to free us. Almost like trust your spontaneity. You've worked very hard. That's why I feel this relationship to the Theosophists, because so often it's like library science. It's like, well, wait a minute, why are we doing this? And I feel this incredible energy from how that energy itself was not squandered. Do you know that it's more energetically a greater footprint to have 7 people show up that care and are investing their energy in why it matters than to have 1,000 people show up that are just there for the dessert. And that's what really a life as an actor professionally really taught me, to recognize that the theosophical, and where he is now is over in the really in the origin section, that we'll start to see this looking back. And this is also on the compass. So we're looking to the east. And what is extraordinary is that when we think of a type of alchemical laboratory, that what's poured out here are stations. Like, but that's also why I started to realize that with the tarot, if we think about the tarot as tuning forks or keys on a piano, then it would say, my instrument is inviting you to play because you're the one that's created the structure. So the last permission would be, well, then how do we open? How do we do this? And because I can't show it with the technology being what it is, but the painting that he's looking at there, Phoenix Arise, will create. Can you show also the wheels that come from that? Because that painting in card form will create these. If you look up there, yeah, these wheels, these mandalas, these medicine wheels. So we're seeing in a painting, in a mathematical form, we are seeing the unfoldment of creation. And what's astounding is that each aspect contains the one. I think philosophically, each aspect is the one unfolding until it comes full circle. And when it does, it reveals it's no one element, it's the blossom created by all of it. And what's another philosophical realization is that there are all sorts of anywhere this painting, Phoenix Arise, opens, creates infinite mandalas. And what's astounding also is that in 10,000 years, it'll say the same thing. That it means that what has happened is not in time, it's in structure. That it never has a painting done this. The story of the Phoenix is told by these cards because it will also create a 3D DNA that was not expected either. And we'll get to that, I'm sure, with the camera. Because part of the invitation here is, if you think of like letting, and I put it this way, in ancient Egypt, the upper and lower Nile, that the Nile was the Milky Way to the ancient Egyptians. Mm-hmm. And so when the pharaoh put the upper Nile on the mitre, he was putting the Milky Way back on his head. And this is why everything had to do with celestialmancy and cosmic alignment, that it was an amplification. And in that, we start to understand what this room is getting at. It's an amplification system. It's not, it is, and I was told that we don't build spaceships, we build mind ships. Mm-hmm. That there is no there in a hologram. And then you start thinking about ancient sites and you say, well, why are they fixed? Why are they structurally not moving? And it's saying, because you're the moving part. And you're composed of all of this. Otherwise, it would not be outside of yourself. You would not be in this dream. were it not waiting for you. Not interesting, that sense of, why? And part of the narrative now is, and this is where he is right now with the Eve's chair. You can see in the below, in the yoni, we have Kuan Yin above, and we have the torso, but we see the apple and the chalice, the grail. And if we think of this bringing back together the story, we can see the cave mothers, this idea of returning to the painted cave, returning to where we began. But we don't return to an empty cave. We return to the library, the DNA, where finally each of us, and this is where when we look at the picture on the screen, we see the blue Kuan Yin, her head, and the sphinxes, wisdom, above, like the upper floor here. And then below we see the torso of woman, headless, as if to say, but we see her breasts, we see her belly, we see the apple, we see the chalice and the blood, we see the grail. And the essential story of the mother here in this world, in this symbolical narrative, taking us back to the cave, was that both man and woman were innocent of this higher shelf because it needed to be created in the lower. Only that would create the foundation that could support the above. So this really mirrors the development of the archetypes, the conversation of Theosophy from 1981 to 2006, and why those are such formative years. And the reason Theosophy, it wasn't a lack of interest, it was that, I don't know, there were certain mooring people, like my dear friend Dallas Tenebrook, and when they decided it was time to exit stage left, I realized, well, sort of like an acting troupe, the old anchors are gone. So my foils are gone. But so much of this I do feel is to try and, if I could do anything, it's to be enthusiastic, almost like a cheerleader for everyone. That I think the hardest thing in time is, well, why? What do you do? And it was actually a Theosophist, my friend Jerome, older, he was probably my age, older in those days. And he said, he was talking about Theosophy, and he said, yes, but what do you do about the despair? And I thought, yeah, that's kind of the key. What do you do about, what do you do about the human? What do you do about the everydayness? Not where you have higher ideals that sound great, but you still have to slog through it. And I feel that this is actually, the art here is trying to talk about precipitation. That, this, what we're looking at, was just, was just a shelf that I built. And it allowed, that shelf then allowed more of an idea to emanate, to manifest. And part of that return to us, I almost feel, is simpler than we thought, more human. And I think at the end of the day, my realization was that if it's not beautiful, it's not our story. If it isn't art, it's not the purpose of the human journey. Because art is not the product, it's the approach. It's not the question, are you here to prove something and illustrate it? Are you here to enter something and honor it? And that's why I have such love of our artists of consciousness, our human beings that say yes rather than yikes. That you could go full henny penny, but don't. And I feel something about this for us is to return the gift that we are each the outcome of a great story. And that the ancestors would say, look at our totem poles. We weren't making up a fantasy. You are growing from your grandfather and your father, your mother and your grandmother. And you're not standing in time or leaning over. You're a tree, you're standing upright. You're the anima mundi, the axis mundi. And when you stand up, you begin to, and that's what everything we're looking at in the room, it is about finally stand up into the story that maybe you and I have precipitated not into time, but into consequence. And that the painting that blossoms, because think about a mantra of the phoenix. You are a phoenix. You are not born into time. You are born into creation. You are holy. You are whole. You are holographic. And essentially it would say, so trust. And the art then here in intimate space is that conveyance of love and trust on our knees, no longer able to figure out what's wrong with the world, or why so-and-so needs to be condemned, but a deeper story that maybe that's the eye of history, like I'm looking and I'm finally saying, what can I learn from you? But I'd love to open it up now, just into questions. Any thoughts? Because it's, as you can see, it's a lot, but it's also, I feel like if you take anything from today, I would love for you to feel hugged. I really would. I just you've worked really hard. It's a slog, and a lot of it is, well, what's the point? And I feel only in the library you realize the point, because it's not in time, it's in the consequence. Yeah. No.
Would you like to show them the show out there?
Oh yes, yeah. We actually, where he's actually just walk out there with the cow, because I've got the speaker. He's going to show us. Now look down on the floor. You see the mandala. That's our tarot wheel. And now as he walks, he will see, and then keep going around to Mothership Truth. You'll see as we see King Kong in the corner there. That was a gift, actually, when I worked at MGM. That was a prototype of the head of King Kong from 1975. And when I put him there, I heard him say, Leigh, the story's about more than just human beings. So we have to remember our Kongs. But we see the mandala there. Do you see the phoenix below? This is the painting, a reproduction of it that's in here. And above it, we see the mandala now, this large 120 cards. But we can see how it looks like an Indian basket, an Indian headdress. And the Hopi say the knowledge of the sacred DNA is in their basket weave. So you think about that on Shumash land, this assertion of the ancestral medicine wheel. When you come back as family, like the mandala, we gather, we blossom, not individually, but as, in a sense, a structure that can formally hold its own deeper story and purpose. And that's why, so truth, move over, keep walking. That's the DNA there that comes from this. And then we're going to go into the mirrored chamber. This is when we begin to look into actually what I did during COVID. But the mirrored chamber, infinite reflection. And we'll turn around and see Mothership Revelations in pink now. And she's going to reveal an extraordinary story that wants to share, that she says, because I wanted to know what orbs, I was photographing them, and I wanted to know what they were. And I started painting them. And then she appeared. And she started to tell me a story. She said, I'm the great mother. I'm the knowledge of your atoms. There are no evil atoms. If you don't like your stories, tell better stories. My revelations are in pink. You can't be angry at pink. It's not enlightenment. It's enlighten up. Breathe. Oxygenate. Get over yourself. And that's why when you put on the 3D glasses, I got to say, it does get lighten up. We've been taking ourselves way too seriously. And also we see the apple in her belly. We see the twins on the lunar arc, meaning that also we see that she says, the mother does not have a crown of jewels, but of tears. And when we begin to perceive that, and that's what this is showing us, literally, is this journey across forever in order to blossom the human form divine, meaning that how can we trust an unfoldment that in every part is whole, like when you were 1 year old or 2 years old, you were you. But the question, like rings in a tree, what would be the cumulative reason? And what's amazing here is she says, now I'll remind you that the willingness to be born was connected to a much bigger question, which is, what does it mean to be human? As an operating system, meaning a unique consciousness capable of its own history, woven of it, but incapable of remembering it. So it has to use that capacity to awaken through the human experience ways of knowing. And this is why through adaptation, alchemy, difficulty, that's why we're surrounded by the arts here. In a sense, the difficulty of how do you take your anguish and turn it into the Ninth Symphony when you're deaf? I mean, we really got to put the human back into the equation. It's not, wow, in spite of being deranged and mad, that person still said yes. And we all benefit from it. So it wasn't obviously the teaching of escaping the conditions. One of the things I really love about Theosophy and the rounds and races, the realization that, as she even says, the Maitreya Buddha, it's not the same quality because our consciousness is evolving different states. And that's why this really becomes a thought form, and she becomes this story of the apple, the story of the gift of life, the alchemy of the gold of the human psyche. And what does that come from? If you think about it, what does your poem come from? Are you happy? What does your love song come from? I mean, we're really thinking, we're trying to heal something. We're trying not to give into the thing, but to take the thing. Say, I got a broken heart, but I want to write a love song. And then all of us with broken hearts, well, I feel that too. And something in that, I just feel it lets us free, like music does. It moves us. It doesn't ask us how we're thinking or whether we're smart enough. That's what I love about art. It doesn't say, hey, are you smart? I'm going to reject you. It says, if you're interested, I'm interested. And I feel like that's our maturing psyche. And I think that's why Blavatsky and the Way Showers were about, you must remember that behind the outer understanding is a deeper pattern that will reveal itself at the appropriate moment, in the same way that a flower doesn't blossom quickly, and it holds that in compression a long time. And if you hold it long enough, you think that's your strength. And so when you start losing, you start thinking, I must be going mad. But what happens is it changes the field. And that's why when one stands like in Mothership here, looking, you're actually in physical relationship. You're walking back into the truth that you have ensheathed into an atom body, a matter body, and that you are woven of this greater love. And that everything here is this sense that when we turn back into the art of our consciousness, the archetype of our consciousness, it allows us to recognize that our pattern was not to escape ourselves, but to recognize the essential need for whatever it is that is ourselves to the larger conversation, which goes back to the beginning of Theosophy when I said that I was to look at everyone as though they were a different aspect of my own brain, which led, I think, to the archetypes as well. So
we're talking about the living library and the custodianship idea, that people, it's not just the books, but it's the life in the books, and and our responsibility really to the future, like a custodian would be. But it's a living library that really caught my imagination. I was wondering if you could go into that a little bit more.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the living element, and I learned this from all of this, is we are taught in our culture everything is math or number, but not in Hermetic science, not in life is the first principle. Everything in life is inherently mathematical. The opposite's not true. So if you start with math, you start with time, space, distance, and something in all of this, the living library became the realization that, and it actually goes back to the idea of the seed manu that Blavatsky writes about, that each life becomes a seed in this larger manu here, meaning that the condition could only reveal its narrative as a living organism, because the point is, like a flower, it lives. It's not something abstract and dead. That's a mausoleum. That's a sarcophagus. But this is this other question of what is it in each of these lives. And it was actually Jung's, in the Red Book, he talks about the dead in the rafters. And I thought, those are the books. But if you don't look at them as dead, but living in their own time, because their time is uniquely essential to the question they embody. Like they needed the 16th century because the question was essentially focused in that time frame. You see, you start to not look at it, it was a movement through time. No, it was a utilization of time. And that the condition of the being was modeled toward how can the 15th century, in a way, add to the, like cell, if you think of everything as membranes, and what's fascinating about the 3D effect here in the Hieroglyph, the human soul, which was not expected, but I realized that it was getting at a layering. In other words, the 3D glasses were saying, essentially, if you look at me one way, put the glasses on, look at me again, neither proposition is false. Both are true. And what happens is that if you think of a martial art or a type of yoga, It says, as we practice this ability to see things in more than one way, and not saying one is right and one's wrong, or one's true and false, but to actually see that they're both essentially true in their own state, then we start to have synesthesia. We start to let the thing itself breathe. And one of the things that Blavatsky really was fascinating. She said, she was asked, well, what are you developing? And she said, the ideal is porousness. And I thought, what a great word, like a sponge, the ability to be breathed, to actually oxygenate. And this is where I go back to the inspirational field, you know.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. As I look around the room, Leigh, and just so wonderful to be in this environment, I'm noticing the art book by Hieronymus Bosch up there.
Yes.
And I was really kind of fascinated about your opinion, maybe through a theosophical perspective, of his thought process revealed in his art. Is it something akin to, you might even say, psychosis?
No, it's actually, I believe there's a direct line between that and this.
Yes.
They're in conversation, because it's that question of the inner, not the outer, but the inner, and that element has to do with how things like in a dream,
Yes.
Turn into dark figures, into strange, surreal environments, and it's that realization that with Bosch. See, I think a lot of this has to do with. I'm sorry about that phone. Usually don't have that on in the thing, but between Dante and Bosch, we start to realize that in history there are qualities of vision in individuals that anchor a dialogue that really isn't in one time, but actually in more than one time. And I maybe you can show it, but the painting on the ceiling is the universe's organism painting of mine. And as we tilt down, we'll see that this is the, yeah, because you do walk over to the Blake. See that painting on the wall over there? If you walk, that's the William Blake. And that's William Blake's vision of the Last Judgment. And it's an extraordinary painting. It's one that I discovered after the painting of mine, because I want you to take that, and then I'd like you to back up, Truth, and look up at the ceiling as well to see that the painting up above, if you can make it out, shares a very great pattern relationship. And this is where I started to realize that we think of reincarnation as personality, but I started to realize, no, what if it's an idea? In other words, that as with Blake, it emanates into the 18th century and 19th century in a way that has to do with Swedenborg, has to do with the ground of how we're looking at things. And then this is much more in a time of quantum physics. So the questions are changing, but the container is revealing that it too is responding in a type of evolutionary way. So I feel like this is, and this painting very much is a portal into multidimensionality. And I feel that why these paintings become so significant is that if we think about drawing forth, drawing down, stabilizing multidimensionality so that we are not dissolved into multidimensionality, everything here is actually about the ability to hold place, to also hold relationship to multidimensionality, but not to be undone by it. And so this then becomes this, it's almost the portal into the that which is outside of time, and always finding an impression within it, and that when you see the language, you realize it is connected. As Monica read in the beginning, it's one voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have anybody in the audience? Do you see any hands?
Yeah. Oh, I don't see. Let me see. Who do we? Yeah. Can you? Let me see. And somebody's got their hand up. So do I? Just Jaro, do you have a question?
How did your journey start in painting your studio? Like, what are some of the oldest paintings or areas that you, or where did you start first, and how did it evolve?
It started in front of the mirror on the floor on 9/11, and it erupted through my hand, it's the Watcher language, and I was not expecting any of it. But on 9/11, it was triggered. It was very interesting, as much of my work had to do with the Watcher. I was very fascinated with the qualities of consciousness that don't intrude, that don't have a personality, but they have presence. And I always wanted to know, what is it in a way that isn't intruding, but it's the field. And what's amazing to me is that when the Watcher language erupts on 9/11, I've fallen on my knees on this linoleum floor. The symbolism of linoleum is in the ordinary. We fall on our knees. And the language of the Watchers, this rhythmic language, which you can actually see, everything is woven of this repeating figure of the Watcher, of the entity. So we're actually looking at a fractal language, a language of entity. And it began, it was very, I think it's almost a comedy, is I did not expect any of this to keep going, but it did. And it was almost as though, and that's where I felt that when this started on 9/11 and on in front of the mirror, it'd be a comedy that I'd say, well, to my wife, Carla, well, Carla, it's a thought experiment. I'm just going to paint this on the floor. I'd be crazy to paint everything. And then, the next, 8 years later, well, I'm not going to paint the ceiling, and that'd be crazy. And of course, I paint the ceiling. So there's something about this, though, that I feel turned into a type of musical composition. And I almost liken it to the falling off the scaffolding of our conceits onto the linoleum of the ordinary. Like, what do we do now on 9/11? What do we tell our children? What do we tell ourselves about why being human matters? And I do think that that's why what you're calling this genius, I feel, is that the genius here is this desire, I'm convinced, of a quality of consciousness that says you've finally completed the second floor. You're home now. Trust. And trust as an artist trusts, meaning that if this manifests through you or something as it won't look anything like this. It's not supposed to. Anymore, your love's supposed to look like my love or his love. I think that's the gift we're starting to get at. It's like, it's the art form of consciousness, not the repetition, not the redundancy, but like the mandala here, the unique geometry. And in that, I believe we really begin to appreciate what the sacred means. I hope that helped. Oh, and there's other names there. I'm sorry. I'm the one that has to look at the names. Sorry, Marion.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I just love your artwork. I was wondering if your home could be preserved forever, in a sense, as
I
we
hope.
we have Theosophy in print and all the writings, but wouldn't it be amazing to have Theosophy explained through art, through illustrations? Art HPB was a really gifted artist herself. And so I think that one of the wonderful things about your home is it gives a whole another way of understanding through art, through the image, to people who may not everybody learns in the same way. And I think that your images could be a way of understanding and learning more about Theosophy.
Beautiful. I would so really, I see this really wanting to happen because there's a grace of it. Do you know this idea that the consciousness that is realizes how hard it's been? Do you know, almost like an empathetic sense of, I just want to give you a hug. I want you to know it's not about working harder or more. It's about honoring the work that you've really participated in for so very long. Then we really do, I feel, start to feel what Blavatsky wanted us to do, which is realize that you are not an invention just happening. You're the outcome of an amazing evolution. And guess what? You're not absent from the evolution. That evolution is in the layers of yourself. It's the very roots that you cannot see. So when you cannot see something, it says you must learn to trust something. And that's what art insists upon. Whether you're an actor, you don't know how to play a role. You have to trust that something will guide you, because nobody can tell you. Same thing with love. Same thing with everything that is actually meaningful in the human experience. Another cannot guide us. We are learned to trust our own, I have to navigate it this way. And I feel the deeper truth is that wherever two gather in my name or in the name of truth, something beyond the individual holds a radiance that lifts us out of our pettiness, out of our smallness into, wait a minute, in this breath, in the upper chamber, I realized what a magnificent work of art this human being is. Because it's never been given, in a sense, the inside track. It's had to recreate. And wouldn't it be the most beautiful truth that only in the life art could we realize our human purpose?
Yes.
It wouldn't be in Deva Khan or Deva Chan. It wouldn't be elsewhere. It would be that vitality actors have in an extraordinary play where you feel everyone's bodies, everyone's energy, you feel the vitality of the performance, and yours is unique from hers. But you feel there's something drawing you into an enthusiasm, and this is what I feel. I feel that's what the invisible wants. Be enthusiastic. And why this is domestic, why this is my home, it's the space I can close the door. We're here by invitation, not by insistence. That's etiquette. And to me, that's the call of the library. That was the call of the books of like the Secret Doctrine, is that open me.
Yeah.
Spend time with me.
Yes.
Don't have an opinion about what you think this is. Spend time with me. And you think about the relationship element in that. Like rushing past true relationship when the relationship is saying, no, spend time with me. If you're curious, open me.
Yes.
Enter me. And this is what I felt with Blavatsky. Spending all of those evenings every week with this enter me. Let's talk in the best way, which isn't intruding on our personalities, what we don't like about each other, but more this shared sense of like, wow, what if we are this wonder being? What if that's possible? And then part of me says, yes, that's the better story. And if I'm here to decide, then it's up to us to decide. Not up to authority, not up to, down the road is going to evolve and we're old souls. That's nonsense. We are vital, living, atomic beings. Literally, not in time. Time is the canvas. This is the hard thing to realize. You and I are the cumulative realization of all time, which gives us a different power. It gives us a power of standing upright in really aligning with the earth. Think of the axis mundi, the center of the earth, the solstice. When we stand upright, the top of the head opens. Not these eyes, this eye. And a sense of wonder informs our vision. And that's the library effect. Like, I realize we've all had a tough time. That's not the point. Thanks. Maluka?
I don't know how to put it in words, but you are such an inspiration, such a powerhouse. And your innovative and independence of thought is extraordinary. And you are doing in painting what HPD did in thought forms.
That's beautiful. Wow. I feel her. I have to say, I feel her. I know, but if you think of the performer side, you feel the melding of it. Because if it's an idea, it's not in the body. It's in energy.
She produces the I think what she did is she put in poetry, and HPB said that the artist, the poet, is the highest expression of thoughts. She said you hit to the sixth sense, the buddhi. And I think that's where you are most of the time, seems like, because based in the beauty that you are able to portray. So she did some painting, and she actually were involved with the Herman, what is it, Shisham, something like that. She was involved with a lot of artists at the time. She did the portrait of her mother and her that sometimes you see around, that she have the head, over her mother's shoulder. I have that. I had a copy of that. And and she was a pianist, you know that. But the poetry, the way she did is what you're doing poetry, but you're doing it with painting. And also she was very much into the image, the symbol, the symbology, which is the language of the soul, all this theosophical symbol with the snake and the triangle, all this wonderful ancient symbol, which is is sort of is there to give us, remind us of who we are and where we're going. And I really think that this is a really wonderful time to celebrate her because it's White Lotus Day, and what better way to celebrate it like bringing into her thought forms into arts, which I thought it was wonderful, great idea. Um, there is an expression that said that we should not celebrate a person's birthday, but rather their day they die. Why? Because when you come into the world, you don't know who you are and what are you going to do. But when you finish your cycle and you die, you left behind something, and that is worth celebrating. And that's, I think, by all the things that we're doing, celebrating her memory and White Lotus symbol and all that, which is extraordinary. So thank you so much again. And thank you, San Diego, for doing this too. I'm sorry I could not join you, but next time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Malika. It's so wonderful. And as always, thank you for your breath of beauty and grace.
Thank you.
Did I see, there was another person I thought, did they jump off or are they on? Oh, was anybody else that had a question out there? Did any of you have a question? No? Well, that would leave it up to me to talk for a few more minutes.
Hey, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the human experience in the details of emptying the garbage and painting art. I mean, the vast. Would you say that connects to this Buddhist concept of the precious human body? You talk about the courage to be born. Yeah. So we are in this precious human body. And maybe part of our attention should be really on the personality as a vehicle for these divine ideas and these higher level ideas to manifest.
Because the crippling element of psychology is the personalization of it. Yeah. I am that, I am incomplete, it's not me. I mean, the drug companies are making a fortune on it. And I feel like this is why the call isn't to heal by stopping that, but to realize that that's symptomatic of a different question now, which is how do we, those that are aware of these things, begin to recognize on a quantum level, on an imagination level, that it is not up to another to decide what the nature of reality is. There is nothing to react to. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is ultimately the realization, like a gardener, that I will cultivate responsibly the 24-hour relationship of these things. This is why this is in domestic space, why it's my home, why it's painted on linoleum, why it's in a ranch-style house. It's about human scale. I realize that that's what it's trying to say, because the feminine, the goddess, the mother returns here, saying that the overlooked element is responsibility. You want freedom, but you don't want responsibility. And so for me, before people come, I spend hours every time cleaning, preparing, realizing that the meditation for me isn't about the escaping of responsibility, but the realizing, no, there's a responsibility upstairs. Yeah. There's also a responsibility downstairs. There's also a responsibility in the domestic. And I feel like why this is art isn't saying, and guess what, it's that guy. It's saying that's the human condition now. We've matured to have a conversation upstairs, to have Tuesday night theosophy, but also to go back downstairs into the black and white, the structure, the archetype. Like, why do we have to endure taxation? In other words, that's Dorothy's Kansas, the black and white downstairs, the father's realm, meaning that you're not invited to say, how would you color it in? Yeah. Sorry, it's black and white, honey. Yeah. That's structure. And it's not interested in our opinion. So we have to navigate structure. And then the middle plane of domestic responsibility, you could argue, is what returns us to why we tell the story. Because if you're responsible for those you love, you're not trying to have a grand highfalutin, no, I'm a super robot, I don't have to have any human emotions. Your wife would look at you blankly and go, honey, that doesn't work for me. I gotta use that as the goddess. Honey, you're getting further and further away from falling in love. Because all I see is fear. And you call it technology.
Yeah.
You are the technology. You are the outcome. You are the ancient one. The ancestors wish to tell us this, not in ways that intrude, but align. This is why it's very important, I feel, that we look at, and there's a celebration going on for Beltane here as well.
Yes.
And so you think of the outside and inside, trying to say it's about giving to each its space and place. And it will then do the work of ruminating us. Paul Foster Case in his tarot, he said, it's not that we meditate, it's that we are meditated. And I thought that's a very interesting insight. Because then you say, like a different book in the library, when you meditate, it's a different book. It's not always doing. It's like, how do I enter? Enter, allow yourself to be meditated, allow yourself to be moved. And so that's, So.
Fantastic. Thank you.
We were in the car driving on the way up here talking about the ancient art of archetype as a method of kind of delivering these truths and preserving them. Dresden Sun.
Yeah.
Why don't you make a plug?
Yeah.
It's written by Theosophists.
Yes, absolutely. Michael Ryan, who is the son of Phyllis Ryan, of great renown to those who knew her. She's a wonderful soul. And Michael, I've known Michael since he was a wee lad, and now he's a grown-up man, and I'm old. I told him, actually, Michael and I'm going to show it afterward. I'd love to show it to you on screen, but he created Vitality and Archetype. We created it in 2003 when it was just beginning here. And then Michael went on, he's a director and writer, and he wrote and directed Dresden Sun, and he called me and he said, I wanted you to play the hero, but it's going to be played by a lady, but can you play the villain? And he was almost an apologetic, and I said, I can play the villain. Not been that. But it was very funny. We were there, and I said, God, it's so strange. I said, I was really, when I used to act as a young man, I was like the youngest guy on the set. And there I was, the oldest guy on the set. And it was just I don't know, there was something like, but the film is called Dresden Sun, and it's streaming now. It's on different platforms. It's great fun. And it does, if you look at it deeper, it's a fascinating, I play a completely manipulative puppet master who delights in your pain. A billionaire. But it's really, I would say, take a look, and also look at it, because he's very much about underlying metaphysical and esoteric streams. Really trying to have a conversation, but in an entertaining, there's a lot of action. So, it keeps your interest, and it's fun, but it's also trying to talk about consciousness, about the in a sense, the usurpation of agency. What is it that could control the mind? What are the influences behind this desire to control how we see, what we see? And a lot of the cautionary tales, I feel, are not saying that these things are happening, but in the environment, they, in a way, teach us to be aware. And this is Michael Ryan, the director I speak of. I was talking about Dresden Sun. I was singing your praises.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
no, so
Michael's more shy and retiring than I am.
I totally correct.
Thank you very, very much, Leigh. Just everything that everybody said is just absolute gratitude for what you've done and for inviting us into your home and for illustrating the etiquette of energy, the whole art and archetype thing, just expanding our minds and our hearts.
Yeah.
And we just really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much for that.
I deeply appreciate you're making the effort to come. San Diego's far away. And a lot of this is that, and I feel it goes back to the Grail. Are you willing to show up?
Showing up.
A lot of effort. The Grail is not for you personally. It's about an ideal that's greater than you. And if you honor that, it will bring us together. And I feel that you're here because that level of consciousness is trying to grace us with You cannot remember these things directly or you would be conceited. You must know them as a lover knows the beloved by honoring them. So on that note, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming. And everyone on the screen, if I missed your question, I'm sorry. But I just want to say I was very honored by being asked, and thank you. And so